Next up, we have Chelsea Castello. Chelsea's an experienced ecologist who has been with Ku-ring-gai Council as a Natural Areas Officer for nearly 7 years. Chelsea's extensive experience in biodiversity monitoring and environmental assessments has greatly contributed to the Eastern Pygmy Possum project. She's here to share her knowledge on creating supplementary habitats in urban areas. Please welcome Chelsea.
I'll give it a go holding the microphone. I don't usually use microphones. All right, so thank you so much for inviting me here to speak to you today about the Eastern Pygmy Possum program and what we've discovered about our long-term monitoring. So just a little bit of a background about the Ku-ring-gai Council area. I like to think of it as a little bit of a hotspot for biodiversity. We don't have platypus, but we do have some pretty amazing, unique species, including lots of threatened fauna species. We adjoin 3 national parks. So we've got Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park right up in the north, and Garigal National Park in the east, and Lane Cove National Park to the west. And lots of council reserves adjoin these national parks, and this creates really nice big tracts of bushland, which supports a really wide range of wildlife. So we've got about 30 threatened fauna species that are known to occur in Ku-ring-gai, and there's many more that are predicted to occur just based on habitat suitability. So how do we monitor these? We've developed a few targeted programs based on a few key species that we have. So we've got a grey-headed flying fox camp in Gordon, so we monitor that on a monthly basis. We've then got a pretty good diversity of microbats, so we've developed an annual monitoring program for microbats. Biobase, that's just the name of our internal database of all records that we collect from community sightings and council sightings, and obviously contribute this to the atlas as well. And then, of course, our Eastern Pygmy Possum, which I'll be focusing on today, and we also form research partnerships with organisations like TAFE, universities, wildlife organisations, community groups as well, to support local research. And we also perform targeted surveys, so if there's knowledge gaps, we'll develop a particular survey just to target that species. So the Eastern Pygmy Possum, they are a tiny nocturnal marsupial amongst the smallest of the pygmy possums. They're really active climbers, so they use their prehensile tail to climb and move through the shrubs. They're a vulnerable species under the Biodiversity Conservation Act. Like lots of our native fauna species, they're really important pollinators. So they feed primarily on nectar and pollen collected from a wide range of native flora species. They've got a really small home range. So the males are slightly bigger than the females, but less than a hectare. So very, very small. And they appear to be mainly solitary as well. So outside of the breeding season, we generally only find 1 in a nest box. And then during the breeding season, you'll find a nice little cute family like this, snuggled up in a nest box. And they use multiple den sites as well, which can make surveys difficult because they're not just dependent on the one hollow again and again. We know that they occupy a broad range of habitats, from rainforest through to sclerophyll forest, woodland and heath. Though in Ku-ring-gai we find that the woodland, forest and heathland communities are the most important for the pygmy possum, and rainforest habitats seem to be more important in the northeast of their range up towards Queensland, southeast Queensland. So naturally they shelter in tree hollows, fallen hollow logs, stumps, and even abandoned bird nests and ringtail possum drays as well. So some of the key threats for this species, obviously habitat degradation is a huge one. This can lead to isolated subpopulations, which makes it difficult for them to survive. Changed fire regimes, So too frequent fire and then not frequent enough can also really impact Banksia species, which they're dependent on. And then predation is a really huge one because they nest so close to the ground, they're really vulnerable to predation. So roaming cats, dogs, and foxes are a huge threat for this species. So why did we develop a monitoring program for the pygmy possum? This is just a snip of the atlas records prior to 2015. So there was really not much known about the distribution of pygmy possums in Ku-ring-gai when the program was developed. They're rarely observed outside formal surveys, so you don't just get, opportunistic sightings of the pygmy possum. And a lot of these records were also quite historic as well, and it's kind of unknown, the reliability of that sort of information. So we really didn't know what sort of habitat they were using and where they were. So the program was developed as a collaboration between council and a really keen local volunteer group. They were super keen to get involved in surveys and just really interested in this species. So a partnership was formed with this community group and with council to develop this monitoring program. So some of the key aims of the program was to improve our understanding of the distribution and habitat of the pygmy possum, provide supplementary habitat where hollows might be scarce, and community engagement was a really big one. It's really nice seeing the volunteers go out and monitor their nest box. They have this they just get so excited if they find a pygmy possum and then they tell their friends, and it's just a really nice way to spread information about our local wildlife. And also just whenever we post on socials about them, it's just another one that's just hugely popular. And also just to promote better management within council, so understanding where they are and how we can conserve and support further habitat for them. So the program was first developed just with 15 nest boxes. Each year this has expanded and it's sort of adapted depending on what we've found in previous years. And we've now got 40 nest boxes throughout Ku-ring-gai. So these are constructed using salvaged pieces of timber or hollows, and then we reconstruct these into small nest boxes. They're probably only about this sort of size. So they're quite small, just given the species is quite small. And we place these at only a 1 metre height in vegetation, so very low to the ground. And we place these in areas with a nice dense mid-story of various species from Proteaceae family. And to monitor these, we do quarterly nest box checks. This is in collaboration with council staff and a group of volunteers. And we supplement this monitoring with cameras as well. So you can see here we've got a camera set up focusing on the nest box, so you can see whether we've got a pygmy possum going in and out of the nest box. And then we've also got cameras set up during the flowering season for species that we know that they feed on. So this is a ericifolia spike, and yeah, hugely successful with the ericifolias. So this is what a nest box inspection looks like if you're lucky enough to get a pygmy possum. So just keep in mind the diameter of that nest box is only about 5 to 10 centimetres, so it's, yeah, very, very tiny. And as I said, they're mainly solitary, so yeah, this is where we found just one outside of the breeding season. So when we do the quarterly monitoring event, we make sure our volunteers take a nice clear photo of the inside of the nest box, a clear picture of the bottom of the nesting material. And this gives us a really good way to monitor how the nest has developed throughout the seasons. So I thought these were two good ones to give you a comparison of two different species. So along the top row, we've got a pygmy possum. So in that first box, That's a pygmy possum that has brought in, I don't know if you can see the fresh just a couple of leaves in that first one. And then by June, you can see there's a nice sort of development of a nest with lots of fresh leaves. And you can see the indentation on the leaves as well. So it's really good evidence that something has been sitting in there. Nice little family of pygmy possums. And then by September, those leaves have dried out. There's not a huge amount of evidence of use. And December, not much happening. And then on the bottom row, completely different looking nest. Same size nest box, but very different looking nests. So this one is absolutely packed full of brown eucalyptus leaves. Does anyone know what species might have used that? Anyone want to guess? Antechinus, yes, excellent. So there's one actually in this last photo. Oh, it's on there. So, yeah, so I've done some camera monitoring on this particular nest box, and I literally ended up with like thousands of photos of this one really determined antechinus just dragging leaf after leaf after leaf into the nest box. Used up, I don't know, ridiculous amount of footage in the camera. But yeah, they like absolutely pack the nest box full of dry brown eucalyptus leaves. So it's a really easy way to tell which species is using the nest box. So we found some pretty interesting results with the nest box attributes. I guess pretty similar to most of our hollow dwelling fauna. They generally choose a nest box that is the smallest possible size to suit the species. And this is to avoid predators and also competition from other species. So these are the attributes that we've had success with the pygmy possum. So you can see it's a very small nest box diameter. So the internal diameter has an average of about 6 centimetres, which when you consider their body length is only like 7 to 10 centimetres. They're really tightly packed in there. The depth is also important, so about 30 centimetres in depth, and the entrance hole size is probably the most critical factor as to whether they choose to go in there or not. The smallest was 21 millimetres. It's just tiny, like you just can't imagine them squeezing in. And an average of about 30 mils is ideal for them. The host tree species, so we generally go for the rough bark species. These are the ones that we've had success with, so Banksia, serrata, Corymbia gomifera, the red bloodwood, stringy bark species, and leptospermum as well. And what we've learned about breeding events as well, so we've found they're generally quite active with nest building during the summer period, and then they'll breed right through to autumn, and then the peak observations of mothers with young generally occurs in the early winter months, so around June. And we've also found a really low detectability of pygmy possums in the spring months, and this is really similar to recent literature by Ross Goldingay, who's like an absolute champion in the research. His study was down in, I think it was Royal National Park, and he also found a dispersal of adults and subadults in spring. So this is what the pygmy possum looks like when they're building their nest. So you can see they're curling the leaves in their tail, which is in comparison to the antechinus, which gathers in their mouth. And then that's just a little picture of the inside of the nest box, how it looks with the fresh leaves. Just a couple of videos of mothers with young I thought I'd share with you. You can see it's a pretty tight fit. And then this one, I just love this one. It's so hilarious. You can just imagine mum being like, get back into bed. This is some really old footage, but I just had to share it with you. It's the most pygmy possums we've found, trying to huddle on poor mum's back. Yeah, three joeys trying to balance on the little branch. So foraging resources, we've found pygmy possum numbers really tend to peak during the late autumn and early winter period, as I said, coinciding with breeding. And it's at this time that the Banksia ericifolia is in full flower, so they've got lots of resources available. So the ericifolia is absolutely a critical species for the conservation of pygmy possums. But we've also had success with a range of other native flora species, so Banksia serrata, Banksia spinulosa, a couple of other ones you can see up there. I'm sure you all have better plant knowledge than I do. Lambertia, callistemon, and Angophora hispida. But I'm sure there's more out there. Those are just the ones that we've found success with. So this is the pygmy possum feeding on a ericifolia spike. We've basically found that if you're putting a camera out on an ericifolia spike in a known area where there's pygmy possums, you're pretty much guaranteed to get one on camera. They just love it. So what we've found in terms of the sightings, this is just a map of, this is just last year's results. So the yellow dots are where we've had pygmy possums, and the red is where they weren't detected last year. We had an occupancy rate of 40%, which is about on average of what we find each year. And we've found the key communities that they're associated with are the sandstone vegetation communities. We've had them found in a couple of EEC, so endangered ecological communities, the coastal upland swamp and Duffy's forest, which is up around the Ku-ring-gai wildflower gardens and the showgrounds. And then we've also had them in the Sydney sandstone ridgetop woodland and Sydney sandstone gully forest as well. And importantly, these need to be adjoining large tracts of habitat. Interestingly though, we have had them recorded in really narrow corridors of vegetation. So if you can see one of the reserves that's coming down, it's Cowan Creek Reserve. We've had them recorded all the way down, which is, I think it's a width of about 200 to 300 metres. So it is good to see that they're persisting in narrow stretches of vegetation, but still it does have to have that connectivity to larger tracts. And we've found that there's just been absolutely no signs of evidence in the southwest of the LGA, so it's sort of assumed that they're locally extinct from that area. It's not too surprising given the barriers to movement north and south with major roads. So if you think back to the previous Atlas records that I showed you from pre-2015, these are all the records now. I am by no means trying to claim all of these sightings. It's obviously, yeah, a huge increase in records. There's a really great monitoring program that's been developed by National Parks. I don't know if there's National Parks people here, but yeah, there's a very robust program. I know they do monitoring in Garrigor National Park and Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park, so it's great to see a huge amount of records up there. And yeah, I was very excited when we found pygmy possums down in East Killara, this furthest southeast point. Yeah, that was a nice little camera record because that's the furthest south we've had them. Yeah, so in terms of future research, I feel like we've learnt a huge amount about the distribution. We know where they are, but we don't necessarily know the density. So yeah, it's definitely something that I want to look into. We just need to figure out how we can best analyse the data to figure out that density or occupancy modelling. And just to touch on some other species that we've picked up, it's really great to use cameras because you get a huge, range of other wildlife using the area. And just to give you an idea of the size difference as well, when you get a ringtail possum, it's yeah, very surprising how it's like, wow, it's so big. Sugar glider. So we see them pretty regularly, which is nice. This one was pretty interesting. We had a feathertail glider, which I was quite surprised about because generally I always thought that they were a lot higher in the canopy, not, a metre off the ground. It didn't actually go into the nest box, but yeah, it was still interesting to record it. That's just a picture of the antechinus. A really good way to distinguish between the antechinus and the pygmy possum is the ear shape. So the antechinus has a notch in its ear, which can be a really easy way to distinguish between the two. And then the tail shape the tail shape as well. So right next to the body, you can see with the antechinus it's quite thin, whereas with the pygmy possum it's like quite a thick tail when it connects to the body and just sort of tapers down. Just if anyone's doing some camera monitoring and needed some ID tips. And swamp wallaby. Yeah, so lots of awesome wildlife that we've picked up just through the camera monitoring as well. Having a good scratch. And yeah, that was it. But thank you.